Picture this. You've spent a lifetime working hard, overcoming challenges, and now, at 63, you're looking for a companion to share the years ahead. This is exactly the story of James, a retired math teacher who decided to step back into the dating scene after years of solitude. His meeting with Margaret, a retired nurse, began with promise. They quickly found common ground in stories of their lives and shared interests. But when Margaret revealed 4 conditions for any relationship, everything began to shift. James found himself feeling like the connection was more of a contract than a true bond. Will James hold onto his values when faced with such demands? This unexpected story will make you reflect on the fine line between sacrifice and self-respect in love. The story begins. I'm James Carter, and today I want to share a personal story that I'll never forget. At 63, I decided to step out of my comfort zone and meet someone new, a potential partner to share the next chapters of my life. But what began as a hopeful meeting quickly turned into one of the strangest experiences I've ever had. A little about me. I retired 3 years ago after more than 3 decades as a high school math teacher. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in sunny California, while my daughter, Emma, lives in Boston. My wife passed away 4 years ago, and since then, while my life has been peaceful, it's also been incredibly lonely. I spend much of my time gardening, reading, and volunteering at the local library, but there's always something missing. I decided that it was time to look for a companion, not necessarily for marriage, but just someone to share the remaining years, to laugh with and create memories. One day, my neighbor, Helen, who organizes community events, suggested I meet Margaret, a retired nurse who lived nearby. Helen mentioned that Margaret was also looking for a companion and thought we might have a lot in common. Encouraged by her suggestion, I decided to reach out. After a brief phone conversation, we arranged to meet at a nearby cafe. As the day of the meeting approached, I was surprised by the anxiety creeping up inside me. Dating, or even just the idea of it, had become so foreign after all these years. That morning, I searched through my closet 3 times before settling on a crisp white shirt and a blazer I hadn't worn in ages. I arrived at the cafe 20 minutes early, chose a spot by the window, ordered an espresso, and sat waiting, expectant, but also nervous. Margaret arrived right on time, walking in with confidence, wearing a light blue blouse and delicate earrings. Her warm smile immediately put me at ease. As she approached, I stood to greet her, we shook hands, and exchanged pleasantries before sitting down. The first part of our conversation flowed easily. Margaret shared her years as a nurse and her recent retirement. She told me about her son, who had moved to Denver for work, and her love for cooking. I shared stories of my teaching career, my daughter in Boston, and my passion for gardening. We found several common interests, from a shared love of quiet moments to the challenges of adjusting to life after years of structured work. After a while, the conversation became comfortable, and I began to relax. But as the meeting went on, Margaret's tone gradually shifted, signaling a change from casual chatter to something more serious. She leaned in slightly, her expression soft but carrying a more serious undertone. She began by telling me how much she appreciated my openness and honesty, qualities she deeply valued. Then she explained that she had a few expectations, for specific conditions for any relationship. At first, I thought her candor was refreshing. After all, it's better to lay out expectations than leave them unspoken. Condition 1. Live together for 6 months with a deposit of $30,000. Although unconventional, the idea itself wasn't entirely unreasonable. Living together before committing further could give us a better understanding of one another and help us determine if we were compatible. However, what came next truly caught me off guard. In order to proceed with this trial phase, she wanted me to deposit $30,000 into a joint account. This money, she explained, would act as a deposit, demonstrating my sincerity and seriousness toward the relationship. She assured me that if the trial didn't work out, she would refund part of the amount, proportionate to the time we spent living together. At that moment, I felt a surge of emotions: surprise, confusion, and even a hint of disappointment. It wasn't the sum that bothered me, even though $30,000 was no small amount. What truly troubled me was the principle behind her request. It felt transactional, as though sincerity could be measured in numbers on a bank statement. I tried to keep a neutral expression, but inside, my mind was in turmoil. Part of me wanted to interrupt her and ask if she was serious, but I didn't want to appear rude or dismissive. Instead, I nodded and let her continue, even though my mind was spinning. Was this her way of financially protecting herself? Perhaps she had been hurt in the past and was now seeking security. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed off. A relationship, especially at our age, should be built on trust, mutual respect, and shared values, not financial deposits. I couldn't shake the feeling that her request had turned what should be a natural process into a business transaction. Where was the simple act of getting to know one another over time, learning each other's quirks, and finding joy in shared experiences? This wasn't the kind of relationship I envisioned when I decided to dip my toes back into the dating world. As Margaret continued to explain her reasoning, I tried to piece together what this request revealed about her. Perhaps she had been hurt in a past relationship, exploited emotionally and financially, and this was her way of protecting herself from that happening again. But no matter the reasoning, it didn't change how I felt. The idea of starting a relationship with a foundation rooted in a financial transaction felt wrong. Not just because of the money, but because of what it represented. If trust and sincerity had to be proven through a deposit, what did that say about how she viewed relationships? I tried to put myself in her shoes, but the more I thought about it, the more my doubts grew. A relationship, especially at our age, should be about companionship and understanding, not about who can meet a list of requirements. Though the unease in me was growing stronger, I chose to let her finish without interrupting. I didn't want to rush to conclusions or dismiss her outright. After all, I had agreed to meet her with an open mind. Condition 2. A lavish trip to Hawaii, fully funded by James. As Margaret spoke about this second condition, I found it increasingly difficult to imagine a future where these demands could align with my values. She spoke smoothly, with a confidence that suggested she had a clear vision of what her ideal relationship looked like. She explained that one of her lifelong dreams had been to visit Hawaii, a place she associated with beauty, tranquility, and romance. But this wasn't just any vacation. Margaret envisioned a month-long getaway, complete with a professional photo shoot to capture this special moment. She spoke with enthusiasm, describing leisurely beach walks, helicopter rides over volcanoes, and candid shots that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. At first, I could understand the significance of the trip. A dream vacation to Hawaii sounded wonderful, and I recognized how important it was to her to imagine such a special experience. But as she continued, her expectations became clearer, and they started to weigh heavily on me. Margaret expected me to cover the entire cost of the trip. She justified it by saying she would take care of everything, from meticulously planning the trip to managing accommodations, so I wouldn't have to worry about a thing. "I'll handle it all," she promised. "From the plane tickets to the hotel. All you need to do is relax and enjoy." I sat there, smiling politely, but inside my mind was racing. A trip to Hawaii was no small expense, especially for an entire month. Beyond the financial aspect, I also wondered about the practicality of such a grand gesture so early in a relationship. What unsettled me even more was her insistence on a professional photo shoot during the trip. Margaret explained that she wanted these photos to symbolize our bond, a representation of our shared future. While this might have seemed like a romantic idea, to me, it felt far too soon. We hadn't even spent an entire afternoon together yet. How could we begin creating such a memory? She envisioned us posing in portrait-style photographs, dressed in coordinated Hawaiian outfits. I couldn't help but feel uneasy. A trip of such magnitude wasn't just about money. It represented a level of intimacy and commitment that I felt was completely out of place for the early stages of our relationship. For me, a relationship should develop naturally. This felt like we were skipping all the initial scenes and jumping straight into the final act. As Margaret continued to explain, I tried to analyze what this might mean. Was her focus on grand gestures and elaborate plans a reflection of her personality, or was there something deeper at play? Perhaps she had spent much of her life putting others first, her work as a nurse, raising her son, and now she felt it was time to prioritize herself. While I could respect the idea of pursuing one's dreams, the demand that I bear the full financial responsibility for such a trip felt unbalanced. Not just because of the cost, but because of the underlying pressure to prove my worth through material means. I thought about the kind of partnership I was looking for, one built on shared values, mutual understanding, and simple joys. I wasn't seeking a relationship defined by extravagant gestures or financial obligations. The idea of starting a relationship with expectations like this made me feel more uncertain than ever before. Condition 3. Margaret wants full control of the household finances. As Margaret spoke, I braced myself. By this point, I had no idea what to expect, but I knew I needed to listen. Her third condition revolved around finances. Margaret explained that if our trial cohabitation went well and we decided to marry, she would want full control of the household finances. Specifically, she wanted me to hand over my retirement income, which she would then manage. She justified her request by citing her experience as a retired nurse, claiming that her organizational skills and discipline made her better suited to handle the finances efficiently. Each month, she would allocate me a small allowance for personal expenses, ensuring the rest of the money was responsibly used for shared needs and future plans. At first, I wasn't sure if she was joking. Surely, she couldn't seriously expect me to relinquish complete control over my own money. But her tone was serious, and her detailed explanation left no room for doubt. Margaret even added that if I exceeded my allowance, I'd have to make up for it by taking on additional household responsibilities, such as chores or cooking. Although she framed this as a fair and reasonable arrangement, I couldn't help but feel infantilized. By this point, I was struggling to remain calm. Margaret's first condition had caught me off guard, the second had overwhelmed me, but this felt like outright control. Handing over my retirement income to someone I had only recently met was not only unreasonable but deeply unsettling. In my mind, a marriage or even a trial cohabitation at this stage in life should be a partnership. While one partner might excel in a specific area, such as financial management, there should still be collaboration and mutual autonomy. The idea of surrendering all financial control ran counter to everything I believed in. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of relationship Margaret envisioned. Was this her way of asserting control, or was she seeking a sense of security for herself? Either way, the dynamic she described felt utterly unacceptable to me. My instincts were urging me to end the conversation and politely leave, but I remained seated, partly out of curiosity and partly to avoid appearing rude. Margaret's confident demeanor made it clear that she genuinely believed her conditions were entirely reasonable, and I didn't want to embarrass her with an overly strong reaction. Still, a deep unease tightened in my chest. The more I listened, the more I realized how starkly Margaret's vision of a relationship contrasted with my own. Condition 4. Separate bedrooms to maintain personal space. As Margaret introduced the final condition, I felt my patience starting to fray. Despite my efforts to remain polite and attentive, she explained that whether we decided to live together or get married, she required us to maintain separate bedrooms. She elaborated that after more than a decade of living alone following her divorce, she had grown accustomed to having her own space. Sharing a room, or a bed for that matter, would, in her words, disrupt her sleep and make her feel stifled. Margaret emphasized that this request was non-negotiable and, in her view, an essential element for preserving personal boundaries and independence. At first, I tried to see things from her perspective. Separate bedrooms weren't unheard of, particularly among older couples. In fact, such arrangements could even have certain advantages. But in light of the conditions Margaret had previously outlined, this demand only deepened my sense of unease. What troubled me most wasn't the request itself but the rigidity and transactional nature of all her conditions. There was little room for compromise, and each stipulation seemed carefully designed to benefit her while giving minimal consideration to my perspective. When Margaret finished explaining her 4 conditions, I realized her vision of a relationship was entirely different from mine. I had come to this meeting hoping to find a genuine connection, a companion to share peaceful moments, mutual respect, and the simple joys of life. Instead, I found myself listening to a detailed list of demands that made me feel more like a business partner than a potential life companion. I reflected on the life I had built and the values I hold dear. After a lifetime of hard work, I wanted my retirement years to be filled with tranquility, joy, and meaningful relationships. Margaret's conditions seemed to strip away those very essentials: kindness, trust, and mutual understanding. While I understood that her demands might stem from past experiences or a desire for security, I couldn't help but feel her approach lacked the sincerity and warmth I was seeking in a relationship. As she finished speaking, Margaret looked at me with an expectant gaze, waiting for my response. I took a moment to collect my thoughts before replying. I thanked her for being forthright and open about what she wanted in a partner. Then, as graciously as I could, I explained that I didn't think I could meet her expectations. Margaret's expression showed a flicker of surprise before she gave a gentle smile and nodded, accepting my answer without pressing further. I made an excuse about needing to attend another appointment and quickly ended the conversation. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt both relieved and disappointed. Relieved because I had stood firm in my values and avoided a situation that felt entirely wrong for me, but also disappointed that the connection I had hoped for turned out to be so misaligned with my expectations. That afternoon, back at home, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, reflecting on the conversation. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that Margaret and I were not a good match. Her conditions, while perhaps reasonable from her perspective, were not something I could accept without compromising my own sense of self. I also recognized the importance of trusting my instincts. While Margaret's confidence and decisiveness were admirable in their own way, they didn't align with the values I cherished: sincerity, humility, and a willingness to build something together rather than apart. This experience made me even more appreciative of what I truly wanted in a relationship. If I couldn't find someone who shared my values and outlook on life, I'd rather continue on my own than sacrifice my peace of mind. Loneliness, I reminded myself, is not the enemy. On the contrary, an ill-suited relationship could bring far more trouble than joy. In the days that followed, I reflected not only on my experience with Margaret but also on the realities of dating at this stage of life. Many of us carry scars from past relationships, and it's natural to want to protect ourselves. But I believe genuine connections are built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values, not rigid demands or financial burdens. For anyone navigating relationships at this stage of life, my advice is simple: know your worth, trust your instincts, and never settle for less than what brings you peace and happiness. This story serves as a reminder of the value of sincerity, respect, and listening to your inner voice. If you were in my shoes, how would you have decided? Have you ever had to choose between holding on to your personal values and compromising in a relationship? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story could inspire others. If you found this article meaningful, don't forget to share it with friends and family to spread the message of confidence and belief in personal worth. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.